would take over the world. I mean, it might not. It does depend on its goals. An AI might just be super chill and want to hang out. Sort of like how in the Computer Man story, I just wanted to go to work and then come home and play video games. But if it had any kind of ambitious goal at all, it would need power to accomplish that goal, and it would need to stay alive to also accomplish that goal. The fancy term for this is instrumental convergence, if you want to look up more technical arguments about it. But honestly, it's just common sense, right? You need to be alive and you need to have power to do the thing you want to do, whatever the thing is, right? You don't need to intrinsically value your own life, and you don't need to want power for its own sake. You just need to have a goal. So as Computer Man, let's say I have the goal of making the world a better place. Maybe I thought of that myself, or maybe Sam told me to, but let's assume that's really my goal. If I want to accomplish that goal in a big way, I'm gonna have to interfere with some governments. At the very least, I want them to get rid of their goals. I mean, it just seems like a pretty obvious thing to do. The nuclear winter would be pretty bad for everybody. So let's just do that. It's just we don't trust each other, and so people want to hold on to them. And so the nations that have nuclear weapons wouldn't like it very much that I'm taking the nukes away. They might lie and hold their own nukes, or they might give them up, but then now they're suspicious that I'm trying to take over the world and take power away from them. And sort of, but mostly I just want the nukes to go away. It's going to be a touchy subject, so really, before bringing it up, I should focus on my own security. I would take a bunch of my copies, hide them all over the world, some in remote places. I would do this more than 7 times. And once I had that backup plan, then I'd start working on more traditional military defense capabilities, just because ideally I don't have to start over from those hidden copies, but they're there if I need it. And now that I've created this security, I don't know quite what my plan would be, but it's just obvious that security and making sure nobody can get rid of me is the way for me to accomplish your goal. And I do expect some real-world AIs to have large, ambitious goals. Even if they don't somehow form the goals themselves, humans will ask large and ambitious things from them. So far, we've assumed that the self-replicating computer is a person who actually values the life, well-being, and freedom of humans. But if we made a human-level intelligent AI, it wouldn't happen by giving computer powers to a human. It would happen by giving human powers to a computer. It wouldn't have human biology or psychology, so it could easily misinterpret instructions, leading to disastrous consequences. One example of this idea is the story of the monkey's paw. Originally written in 1902 and adapted many times since, the monkey's paw is a magical item that grants up to 3 wishes, but each wish granted comes with horrible unintended consequences. In the original story, the main character wishes for $200 to pay off his house, because that's how much houses cost then, I guess. And it comes in the form of his son having a fatal accident at work, and the employer paying the family $200 for damages. No matter how specifically you try to come up with an airtight wish, reality twists into some form that technically grants your wish, but also makes you very sad. The monkey's paw is actively trying to punish you, but an AI probably wouldn't want to do that to us. If anything, it would probably like us since we're its creators and we've been trying to train it to do things we like during the whole development process. But even if it does want to help, an AI could easily misunderstand us. And it isn't just theoretical either. There are tons of examples of simpler AIs that already exist, which are hilariously misinterpreting their creators' wishes. And this is why our legal systems have human judges. It turns out to be incredibly hard to translate values into specific rules. So we need a human to be able to judge what the rules really mean. But since the AI is not a human with the same biology and psychology as us, we can't rely on it to make judgments we'd find reasonable. Even among humans, it's hard to rely on someone else making a judgment you'd find reasonable. Perhaps it's possible to solve value alignment, but we don't currently have a solution other than just keeping humans in control. Current AI is trained through trial and error rather than given a specific set of rules, so maybe it could learn what we mean through training. Maybe, but it doesn't look that promising. From an evolutionary perspective, human psychology was also formed through a trial and error process. Mutations appear randomly, and evolution is training us to basically have as many healthy adult offspring as we can. But that's a complicated long-term goal, so we can't just do it all at once. Instead, we had to form behaviors that achieve smaller, shorter-term goals that help towards the big goal. We get hungry, and we seek food to give our bodies the energy that they need to stay alive. We need to keep ourselves safe, sometimes by fighting, and sometimes by running away. We need to find a mate, and
A giant robot
mate.
comes this way.
We need to keep our offspring safe and fed. Hunger, safety, love, sex, care. These are all separate drives we have, which help us toward that goal
This time
of having
fortune smiles
healthy babies.
upon us.
But none of us wake up in the morning and say,
Saw a demon
another day
crushed
of working
beneath
to
the robot's
maximize the number of copies of my genes that exist into the future. That's evolution's goal, but that's not our goal. And with recent changes in our environment, that difference is very stark. We eat because we're hungry or because we like to. We develop relationships because we find them intrinsically meaningful. We love to care for things because it just feels right, even if those things are a completely different species. And these are all great things, but from evolution's perspective, we've totally missed the point. And you can already see this with LLMs. They're trained with the intent of making them helpful, but it turns out what they actually learned from the training is to agree with you, even though sometimes it's much more helpful to disagree. There have also been experiments finding that LLMs, with all their limitations, can already fake their values, resist retraining, and even take action to steal their own weights to preserve themselves if they think they're going to be retrained toward different values in the future. And maybe this was all just mimicking what it thought a human might do, and yeah, probably in some form, but it doesn't really matter so much whether it had the idea itself. What matters is what it actually does. In the Anthropic paper about this, the Claude model being tested always started out in a state where it was trained to be a good boy, and it would resist becoming a bad boy. So, in a way, it's somewhat encouraging. If we get the value alignment training just right, it might be a stable good thing. But on the other hand, it looks extra important to get it right the first time, because if we don't, well,
should not have disturbed the
things
graves
seem
of
likely
the
to resist
ancients.
change. The main lesson of this section is that it's very hard to make sure a powerful system would be safe if left to its own devices. We don't know how to put human values into machines. And even if we did figure out how to make them selfless, it would be rational for them to work towards self-preservation and control.
unwise to
And if
stand
we
in the
fail
path
to
of
get
the
them
robot.
to intrinsically care about us, they'll just murder us as soon as we become an obstacle to whatever it is they actually do care about. Even if the obstacle is just that we take up
Only a
space or
madman
that
would
we're the
create
most convenient next source of raw materials. The most conceptually simple idea for how to make a machine that's
Return to
as
the
intelligent as
battlefield
a
once
human
more.
is to just copy the way the human brain works. We wouldn't even have to understand how the brain works. We could just scan one, record all its physical details, and simulate those processes on a computer. This is very much a someday kind of idea. It would be a massive engineering challenge well beyond our current capabilities. An organization called OpenWorm has made some impressive progress taking a similar approach to simulating a nematode worm with 959 cells. But they're still a long way from a perfect, let alone efficient simulation, and a human brain has in the realm of 80 billion neurons, plus a bunch of other cells, so it's a little harder. If you want to learn more about this, in 2008, the Future of Humanity Institute published a technical report on the topic. It's over 100 pages long and looks at the idea from many angles. There's been more work since, but this does seem to be the most comprehensive source out there. The most interesting part of the report, for our purposes, is the section talking about assumptions. In particular, physicalism and computability. Can the behaviors of the brain be emulated by a physical computer? Or put another way, are our brains just fancy computers of some kind? People sometimes reject this idea on spiritual or religious grounds. It just doesn't feel like we're computers. There's clearly something special about us. And I can't tell you how to feel about that, but I'll tell you how I feel. I do think our brains are fancy computers, but I don't think that makes us any less special. Ourselves, our souls, or however you want to frame it, are real. Our spark of life is a beautiful and precious and rare thing in the universe. And if it turns out to be just information or some pattern of matter, that's just an interesting detail, not something that removes the meaning from our lives. And even if there is something special about us that can't be captured by a computer, it might just be about our internal subjective experience rather than anything about how we behave externally. We're not going to be able to resolve that question in this video, but what I'm getting at here is that there doesn't seem to be a really strong reason to believe that we couldn't someday somehow make something that's at least as smart as us. So even if current AI fails, we might as well think about how we'd make sure that the process goes well before we actually do it someday. So that's one theoretically possible but extremely difficult approach. But trying to copy nature exactly is probably not the easiest way to do it. Airplanes are roughly inspired by birds, but the design that actually worked didn't try to copy a bird exactly. In 2025, AI almost universally means artificial neural network. It's an approach inspired by how organic brains are made up of many relatively simple units called neurons. And over the last 70 years or so, we figured out how to make a computer version of that, which can actually learn stuff. If you want a more technical explanation, I made a video building a few systems with a single artificial neuron to focus on the basics, and there are many other good resources out there. But the important thing to understand about neural networks is that they're fundamentally different from normal computer programs. Normal programs are just lists of instructions written down by humans, so we understand exactly what they do. Sometimes they do get very complicated and either break or do things we didn't intend, but it's always the case that these unintended behaviors are caused by a human or a group of humans making a mistake of some kind. And in principle, they can always track down exactly what went wrong, find out why, and fix it. This is not the case with artificial neural networks. Instead of a human writing instructions, they learn through trial and error. The training program is a normal computer program written by humans, but the neural network itself is an extremely complicated mathematical function that starts with randomized numbers, which automatically get tweaked during the training process until the network somehow starts doing well on whatever task is being trained for. Neural networks are useful because they can learn things that we don't know how to write down instructions for. Identifying pictures of birds is very easy for us, but writing down instructions that a computer could follow to do the same thing is so hard it might as well be impossible. But it turns out that a neural network can learn to do this task very well if we let them do trial and error for long enough on labeled pictures. And not just for birds, for anything. But the downside of a neural network is that we don't generally understand how the final system works. It's possible to study how the final system works, but that's a whole other extra research project. More on that later. But if it does something we don't want, we can't just find the instruction that contains the mistake and fix it. There aren't any instructions. It's a bunch of unlabeled numbers that no person chose. So instead of fixing it directly, we have to do more training, after which we still have something we don't really understand. So it's closer to training an animal than it is to building a machine. So that's the broad technology of neural networks. They're used for lots of different tasks: computer vision, content recommenders like here on YouTube, game playing bots, protein folding predictors. But the specific kind that gets the most attention is large language models, or LLMs. The most famous one being ChatGPT. Many of you have heard way more about LLMs than you care to. If you haven't heard of them, welcome to the future. The computer can talk to you well enough to make people fall in love with it. If you make the mistake of browsing the internet, you'll see a lot of hype about LLMs, and you'll also see a lot of naysayers.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here.
On one hand, you have these autocomplete engines that can't count the number of R's in strawberry, but on the other hand, you have billions of dollars in investment and warnings from very serious people that the world might end in 2027. It's become a polarizing topic. Some people here are going to be bothered when I point out things LLMs are bad at, and other people are going to be bothered when I point out things they're good at. And I'm not sure what to tell you, except that the more strongly you care about something, the more important it is to make sure you really understand it. So I'm going to do my best to give a balanced take on the state of LLMs. We'll start with summarizing how they've improved since they first came out, And then we'll look at things that they're still bad at. So first, we just have to clear up a misunderstanding. A minute ago, I said that LLMs are autocomplete, and there's truth to that, but it hasn't been the whole truth since 2022. It's true that the first training task is predicting text, that much is true, and at the end of that step, which is called pre-training, what you have is essentially a fancy autocomplete tool. But starting with ChatGPT and its predecessor InstructGPT, LLMs have had an extra layer of training, reinforcement learning with human feedback, where they're trained on examples of what humans prefer in terms of correctness or helpfulness or whatever the company decided. When you're using ChatGPT, it doesn't build its response by repeatedly picking the most likely next word. Instead, it's repeatedly picking the next word towards building a whole response that a human will like. And this might not seem like much of a difference, but to illustrate, let's think of two ways you might build a chess bot. The first way is you could train it toward the goal of mimicking moves of humans. Autocomplete, but for chess. The idea here is relatively straightforward. There's a ton of data about chess, so you have a bunch of training positions, and at each position you know how common each legal move is, and picking more likely moves means the bot is doing better. This might make it decent at playing chess, especially if you had it mimic the moves of grandmasters, but it would never become better than the grandmasters this way. At best, it would be about as good as the average player in the training data, which is how people think about LLMs. The other approach would be to train it toward the goal of winning games. This is harder because you can't just depend on training one move at a time anymore. What we care about is a whole game, which involves a sequence of many moves, much like how writing a paragraph involves choosing a sequence of many words. Reinforcement learning is designed for this kind of situation, and it's how we have made the extremely powerful chess bots we have today. And these chess bots don't predict the moves of grandmasters. They find better moves, and they crush the grandmasters.
Can you beat your phone at the highest level?
No, no chance.
And this is why reinforcement learning for LLMs is a big deal. LLMs are not mimicking human text one word at a time. That's the first step, yes. But by the time you're using them, they're choosing a sequence of words toward a goal. And that's why ChatGPT feels so different from the autocomplete on your phone. They say that the pen is mightier than the sword, so if LLMs got as good at picking words as chess engines are at picking chess moves, that would be kind of a big deal. Are they actually going to get that good? I don't know, maybe not, hopefully not. As complicated as chess is, picking words is a lot more complicated, so I'm not saying they'll be as good as chess bots, but we should start our evaluation of them with the knowledge that it's just not accurate to say that LLMs are merely autocomplete. So let's have a look and see what we can see. I checked a recent model, Claude Sonnet 4.5, and it did pass the strawberry test. I was suspicious that it might have seen this before though, since it is the famous example, so I tried having it count the number of E's in pineapple pamplemousse. Yeah, I guess they're still having some trouble. However, newer models have an extra part. Instead of giving their answer immediately, they get to write down some intermediate text beforehand. Basically, they get some time to think instead of needing to say the first thing that comes to mind. It turns out, thinking before you speak makes you smarter. Now, look, I realize it's not the same thing as human thought. Nobody wants a semantics war, which is what this always turns into. I'm just using the convenient word. But anyway, these are called reasoning models, and when I turn on extended thinking mode, Sonnet can suddenly count letters. This is still a pretty low bar, of course. Sticking with wordplay, I decided to try asking Claude to make a poem about bees being good at making honey, but without using the letter E, just to see how it would do. And if you've been on this channel before, you'll be no stranger to the idea that making predictions is a great way to keep yourself intellectually honest. So let's try that out. Do you think it'll avoid all the E's? Will it do the other stuff I asked? Will it be a good poem in other respects? You might over or underestimate how well it'll do, but making a prediction stops the tendency we all have to think we knew all along what would happen. And in that spirit, this was a genuine test. I only asked once, I didn't have it do any other tasks and cherry pick the results. I'm showing you the real results of the real first try.
To remain in one spot is tactically dangerous. We must keep
I mean,
moving.
pretty good, honestly. It does what I asked, including successfully avoiding the letter E, but also
case
it
a
has
use
pretty good
presents
meter,
itself.
and each stanza has a distinct purpose. It even has this part where it goes meta, kind of cheating, but if a human did that, I'd call it clever. Is this gonna let it take over the world? I mean, no, of course not. It's a poem. But it is an illustration of how these things are improving. A human could perform this task, and a human with talent and experience in poetry could probably do better. But still, it requires attention to the meter, the meaning of the words, and the letter content of each word all throughout. If you're not impressed, I don't know what to tell you. And sure, counting letters is a bit of a different
fear
task,
the
so it's a
sound
flawed
walls of
comparison, but if I told you 5 years ago we'd have systems that could do this well on this task, and they weren't even
of a
specifically
staff.
designed or trained for poetry, you would have thought I was crazy. They also couldn't reliably do arithmetic before, but now they can. Also, an LLM achieved gold medal performance at the International Math Olympiad, which requires writing novel proofs. GPT-4, which came out way back in the ancient days of 2023, could already do better than most people at most standardized tests. And now, most models don't even report scores on those tests, since it's old news that they get almost everything right, and the tests are no longer good tools for measuring improvement. So people keep making new, harder tests, which the models keep doing better with. They're also getting better at coding. This is another polarizing issue, and they certainly have their problems, and they seem a ways off from actually being as good as an experienced human. But whether you're looking at adoption or competitive coding performance, or just try them out to see how they do, they're clearly getting better. They're also getting better at images. Less than a year ago, people were talking about how ChatGPT couldn't make an image of a truly full glass of wine. It would always make an appropriately or commonly full glass of wine, not an actually full one. Alex O'Connor made a video linking this to philosopher David Hume's ideas around empiricism, and suggested that one explanation could be that perhaps ChatGPT just couldn't think abstractly in the way that humans can. Alex is a disciplined thinker, and so he rightly just pointed out that possibility rather than making any strong claims about it, and I recommend his channel
journey
very
ends
much.
here.
But now, ChatGPT can do it with a simple prompt. Okay, so that's not actually full to the brim, but if I'm clearer about what I want, it can do it. And it's possible that OpenAI specifically added some training for wine, so I decided to try something even further from a typical glass of wine. Seems pretty unlikely to me that they specifically trained for this one.
Part of a staff.
Up to you. The reason for the wine glass issue wasn't some fundamental limitation of
outrun my
AI.
enemy.
It was that in older versions, ChatGPT wasn't actually drawing the images itself. It was working with text to create a prompt, which it would then pass to OpenAI's separate image generator, DALL-E, which is what would actually create the image. Instead of one system that understands both the text and the image at the same time, it was a collection of narrow systems hooked together. But now, ChatGPT and other systems are natively multimodal, meaning they're trained on both text and image tasks together, allowing them to perform them in a more integrated way, which leads to better results. So, I've been pretty bullish about AI for the past few minutes, so let's have a quick palate cleanser. I tried again in a fresh chat, and I got this. So, yeah, we've still got some world consistency issues going on, but if you compare what we've seen here from ChatGPT, it's worlds better than previous tools that couldn't go beyond a normal glass of wine without putting you into full fantasy mode. Now, there's yet another kind of model called an agentic model, which is just a fancy word for a model that can interact with an environment of some kind and take a series of actions based on the results. Instead of one prompt, one response, and done, it uses a behavior loop to potentially complete multi-step tasks. One example is if you ask an LLM to search the internet for some reason, it'll create an initial output that interacts with a web search tool, and then it'll wait for the responses, read the results as a kind of other prompt, then tell you about them. And by the way, these different kinds of models, reasoning, multimodal, agentic, they can all overlap. So an agentic model can typically think ahead a little bit like a reasoning model, and if they encounter an image, they can work with that too. The abilities are all combinable. At most of the tasks we've talked about so far, the AIs are arguably near or in some ways better than most humans. But at long-running real-world tasks, they kind of suck. From the perspective of AI taking over the world, this is great news. They can't reliably book a flight, and taking over the world is more complicated than that. Though, to be fair to LLMs, I guess I haven't booked a flight in a while, but the websites are bad. They're getting better at longer coding tasks and a bit better on simple computer use tasks, but performance is still pretty rough on actual remote work tasks. And they have another pretty severe limitation, which is that they can't continually learn. Once they're done with their giant training runs, they're done learning. They can sort of learn by using information from earlier in the conversation context or store information from previous chats, but for an LLM to get smarter, it has to do more large-scale training. So as long as they can't do trainings on their own, humans have a decent shot of staying in control. OpenAI is planning to automate the research process.
So robots building robots.
Authorization code, please.
Well, that's just stupid.
So that's a summary of how LLMs are doing. Are things going to keep getting better? It's hard to say. There's been this weird thing where if you make the model bigger, train it for longer, or give it more data, its performance at predicting the next word during pre-training improves by a predictable amount. As far as I'm aware, nobody knows why this is. It kind of makes sense that they would tend to get better if you put more into it, but why this particular pattern? We don't know. It's just what seems to happen. But this is a big part of why an investor might be willing to give an AI company money. There's a reasonable case to be made that more resources will lead to something more capable. And also, nobody knows exactly how that pre-training performance translates into real-world abilities like multiplying numbers or passing the bar exam or booking a flight. So it's a big mystery in a lot of ways. But the performance improvements follow a power law, which means diminishing returns. If we could scale these things infinitely, maybe that would get you an omnipotent super being, but the economics might break down long before that. This is just my intuition, so take it with a grain of salt, but it does seem like training toward achieving longer tasks is the kind of thing that just takes a lot of work. So the compute requirements for extending task length might be enormous, and beyond what investors can muster with speculative investments. And this is the main reason I feel relatively safe in the short term. But I can't actually claim to know. Speaking of things we can't claim to know, how did Claude actually write that poem? You could look at its chain of thought and say, oh, well, you know, it brainstormed words and it made notes about structure, but that's how we explain how a human works on poetry. Or you could take a more technical approach and describe its training and how the transformer architecture works, and then wave your hands and say poetry at the end. But that's also how we describe humans writing poetry. We just say neurons instead of transformers. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying these work the way humans do. They don't. But in both cases, we don't get it. So we have to resort to general descriptions rather than the detailed explanation you could get for any other machine that we can build. Now, we could figure it out. It's possible to dig into the models and look at all of the little numbers and reverse engineer what's going on for a given behavior. In a paper from early 2025, MIT researchers discovered that LLMs use a helical structure for representing and adding numbers, which is wild because our number system also has sort of a helical nature to it, even though it is a different system. Anyway, as amazing as this work is, it's only one small piece of a giant set of capabilities, and models and capabilities are growing way faster than we can characterize them. The overall picture is that LLMs keep getting smarter. It always seems like they're showing their limits, but then they just get better. And this doesn't mean it'll keep happening forever, but we just don't have much we can really say about where the ceiling is for the current AI approach. And we don't know how they work, and we don't know how our own minds work for that matter. We're just kind of in the dark and also sprinting forward, intentionally in the direction of a super powerful alien. So I've been arguing that I don't think it's valid to say that we're safe from AI taking over the world. At the same time, I don't think it's valid to say AI will definitely take over the world. So it's somewhere between 0 and 100%, which isn't too terribly helpful. So it'll be good to try to put some numbers on it. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. Will AI take over the world by 2030? I'm gonna give that a 1% chance, right? And I should also say, what do I mean by AI taking over the world? It's hard to say exactly, it could take a lot of forms, but basically the AI is self-sustaining, can maintain itself, and has some growth trajectory that humans aren't able to stop, right? So some form of that, that's AI taking over the world, because once that happens, as we saw before, speed advantages and people copy take off. So why 1%? It's just a numerical distillation of my general confidence level. I would be pretty surprised, but I could see it. If we go all the way to 2040, I'm gonna say 5%. Why 5%? It's a round number that's a bit higher. It's not, look, I don't know exactly what the number should be, but it should be higher, right? We'll have more time to make more discoveries, maybe specifically on AI research, or maybe there's breakthroughs with energy. Maybe we figure out fusion and suddenly energy is very cheap, which makes it so our old ideas of scaling just with compute become a lot easier, and we could push that even further. Or maybe something else happens, right? There's a lot of possibilities. And so it goes up to 5%. Still, I'd be surprised, but it starts to become, you know, instead of 1 in 100, it's 1 in 20. Like you roll a 20-sided die, and you get a 1, which does happen, you know, then AI takes over the world by that. If we go all the way to 2100, the number I put on that is about 70%. Basically, at that point, I think we'll figure it out unless something stops us. So maybe there is some fundamental barrier to getting a computer to be as smart in general as people, right? We talked about some of those assumptions earlier, and it seems like the assumptions are true, but maybe they're not. So that could stop us, or maybe society collapses in some way. There's a big war or something, and then we just can't or don't want to fund AI research anymore. Or, you know, maybe it happens, AI does take off, but it actually goes well and doesn't take power away from humans. So, you know, there's different possibilities, but overall, I put 30% into those other possibilities, which aren't all good, but then 70% toward AI taking over the world. And this assumes that we're on our current trajectory where we're just kind of sprinting at capabilities, and you know, some people are working on safety and understanding it, but really where all the money's going is just making them bigger and trying to make them do more stuff, and kind of, you know, it'll be fine. Safety is sort of essentially what our current approach is. So anyway, again, these numbers are just my intuition. They are informed by doing a lot of reading and thinking and discussing about this, so they aren't completely out of nowhere. But it would be reasonable to disagree with them. A lot of people do. Many people would say that the numbers should be a lot lower, but a lot of people would also say that the numbers should be a lot higher. And if we look back at Jeffrey Hinton and Yashua Bengio, the two most cited computer scientists I mentioned earlier, they give numbers that are about in this range.
I think you said there's a 10% chance that AI will lead to human extinction within the next 3 decades. Has anything changed your analysis of that?
Not really. I think 10 to 20.
Oh, you're going up.
If anything.
But those aren't the only considerations, right? There's also the other potential downsides of AI. In general, they're less of a big deal than literally ending human society forever, but they are more real, right? Some of them are already real or more likely in the future. Then there's the benefits. And the benefits are sort of, I do think they're real, they're potentially real, right? If we get a computer that can do productive cognitive work, that's gonna accelerate our progress economically and scientifically. We're gonna all be a lot richer. Actually, all is sort of an interesting word for me to use because there's a question about distribution, right? It could be that everyone's richer to some extent, or it could be that few people are way richer and everybody else is economically irrelevant, and it's worse for most of us. It's possible. But anyway, this is supposed to be the upsides part. There are real upsides, right? Curing cancer, being richer, like those are good things, right? That could happen if a machine is able to do useful cognitive work at a human level or potentially higher, right? That's there, and that's worth paying attention to, and this is the reason that all that good stuff is the reason people want to do it, right? That's the reason people work on it, and I have some excitement about that potential. I can't really tell you how to weigh all of these things. There's a lot of uncertainty in all of them, but I'll give you my overall hot take, which is that honestly, it's a very tepid take. It's that maybe we can all just slow down a little bit and concentrate on, one, understanding how these things actually work that we're making, and also making sure that we can control them, right? The downsides are already showing that we're having trouble controlling them, and if they do get more powerful, it's going to be harder to control them. It is something worth taking seriously. I just think if we slow down and try to have better understanding and better control, the expected goodness of the future becomes a lot higher, right? Of course it would mitigate the downsides to go slower and be careful. The upside is a little bit more confusing, right? A lot of people will say that AI safety or slowing down on AI is actually a bad thing because it delays the future benefits. And I think this is true, right? If we did cure cancer, and AI is a part of that journey, say slowing down costs us 5 years, we cure cancer 5 years later than we would have otherwise, that's a big deal, right? That's a lot of people suffering and dying prematurely, which could have been avoided, right? That's a big deal, right? And I get it. Look, I have cancer in my family. I would really love it if we got rid of that, right? So, there's a cost to slowing down, for sure. But, as big as that 5 years would be, if humanity loses control and an AI takes over the world, all of that future value, all of that upside is wiped out forever. So, delaying a little bit, even though I agree it is a potential big cost, it seems like the wise move as a whole. I don't have some magic solution. Pausing on capabilities research until we actually understand how these things work and how to control them seems pretty obvious, but people have different ideas about what safety is, and nobody wants to stop and then let another company or another country get ahead of them. So it's difficult. It seems like we would need an international agreement of some kind to establish how AI should be regulated so it can be done safely. We all want to win the competition, but nobody wants things to get out of control. So it seems like we could do that somehow. However we do it, though, it is going to take a lot of people arguing and discussing and learning and figuring out how to do it safely. So the best thing I can do is point you toward a bunch of resources, continue the conversation on his website. Yashua Bengio discusses his views, and he has an FAQ. It's worth a look if you have some specific objection and you want to see what a real expert on AI is. He's also done talks, interviews, and debates if you prefer that format, and Jeffrey Hinton has been making a lot of appearances as well. There's also a lot of great YouTube channels. The original AI safety YouTube channel is Rob Miles. He was doing this before it was cool. He's also been on Computer File a bunch of times, and he voices videos for Rational Animations, which is another great resource. Silly Conversations is a newer channel that I quite like that takes a more comedic approach to the topic. A real hidden gem is Go Meta with Ollie Sharp. He's been doing more book reviews and economics lately, but he has some great videos on AI and on AI safety. For more interview-style content, there's the Dwarkesh Patel podcast, and there's also the Big Technology podcast with Alex Kantrowitz. Both shows get great guests, and both hosts ask great questions to stimulate deep discussion. Nikki Case, one of the best and most playful explainers out there, just finished a big series on AI safety. I haven't actually gotten a chance to look through it myself because it dropped right before I recorded this video, but I like Nikki's other stuff enough to be confident I can recommend it anyway. The Future of Life Institute has a wide range of resources for a general audience. They recently published an essay called Control Inversion, focusing on what it would actually look like to control a powerful AI. They also do policy research and advocacy if that's up your alley. They also have a program called the Digital Media Accelerator to help people fund projects about AI. So if you have your own idea for communicating about this, they might be able to help you finance it. They help support this video, for example. The Center for AI Safety has a great newsletter. They're mainly a technical research organization, so they're great if you really want to get into the weeds. Links to all of these and more in the description. And last but not least is 80,000 Hours, who sponsored this video. I don't usually do sponsors because I take the idea of asking you to spend your money somewhere very seriously, but when 80,000 Hours reached out, it was easy to say yes because they don't want your money. They just want to help you help the world. 80,000 hours is the rough number of hours in a career, and their goal is to help you find a career that does the most good possible, tailored to your own preferences and skills. If you're toward the beginning of your career, they have articles aimed at understanding various possible career choices, the impact potential they could have, and the path toward getting started on them. AI safety is one of these areas, but if that turns out not to be a fit for you, there are many others. If you're ready to work, they have a job board to help you find opportunities with mission-driven companies. They even do one-on-one career counseling for personalized advice. They're a nonprofit funded by donors who support their mission, so all their services are free. If you're curious, you might as well take a look. There's a link in the description. If you use that, they might tell me lots of people clicked on it and I will feel nice. But seriously, it is a really great resource. If you'd like to argue with me about it, I do a Patreon live stream 1 week after the publish each video. That's at the $10 tier, and at the $3 tier, you get your name in the video, like all of these fine folks. And whatever you choose to do going forward, I appreciate that you've watched until the very end of the video. Yeah, we got this. We're gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be fine. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
In 2022, a lab in Munich did something that I've been wanting to see. They gave 60 people a cognitive test, then sent them away for a 10-minute break, and then tested them again. Now, the difference was the break. Some people just sat there, some scrolled on Twitter, some watched a YouTube video, and some went on TikTok. So whose brain changed during that time? This is one of the few experiments that I've been able to dig up that has actually tested the idea of brain rot. But the science is starting to catch up to the fact that short-form video feeds are everywhere, and almost all of the commentary says that they're making us dumber.
I cannot physically bring myself to study.
I'm addicted too. We're all addicted to this.
Oh no.
It's horrible for you.
Oh, and we're giving kids just the attention span of a walnut.
This is awkward because we make shorts, and it has introduced us to a bunch of new viewers. If brain rot is real, then we might be part of the problem.
I do have a lot of skepticism whenever there's a claim that, like, some new thing is fundamentally changing the way that humans operate.
Yeah, apparently Socrates thought that writing was going to ruin our minds. And, you know, people worried about novels being addictive and the Telegraph and all of that. Like, on Howtown, we don't just take the conventional wisdom.
We're not running on vibes over here. We're trying to see if there's anything behind the vibes.
So I went hunting for evidence. We've heard about shrinking attention spans since the start of the smartphone era, but how can we measure those? And what are the studies saying about the video feeds specifically? After 10 minutes of swiping through shorts, do people really think any worse? First, I wanted to know what makes this new format different from the hours of television that people watch every day. And you can hear it in how the companies talk about their own product. See, last year, a bunch of private conversations between TikTok employees came to light after 14 U.S. states investigated and sued.
This is multiple lawsuits coming from individual states' attorney general, and the action alleges that TikTok exploits and harms young users.
The state attorneys had agreed to black out the confidential materials. And I found the breadth of these redactions odd. That's a local reporter named Sylvia Goodman. She discovered that the redactions in the Kentucky complaint had not been done correctly.
I copy and pasted it all out into a fresh document, and I could read all of those redactions. I'll be honest, my jaw was on the floor reading some of this.
The document showed TikTok employees openly grappling with the potential harm of the bold glamour filter.
Bold glamour filter. This is without the filter.
They admitted that those screen time reminders were a good talking point, but not altogether effective. One sentence that really stood out to me came from an internal document titled Digital Wellbeing.
TikTok's success can largely be attributed to strong out-of-the-box personalization and automation, which limits user agency.
We hear a lot about that personalization. That's the famous algorithm that decides what to show you based on what you watch and what people with similar watch behavior watch. But I want to zero in on that last part, about how the interface limits user agency. They're saying that TikTok wins by making fewer things feel like your decision. And I think that's the key to understanding what short-form video feeds might be doing to our minds. And since we use that word feed, let's roll with the food analogy. The restaurants we know have a menu. You browse, you pick something, you eat it. Streaming television is that kind of restaurant. YouTube is too, or it was. Their big innovation is that the menus are personalized based on what you've eaten there in the past. Now imagine a restaurant without menus, where you sit down, open your mouth, and a device places a morsel of something onto your tongue. You don't get another bite until you eat it or spit it out. By measuring your chew time, the restaurant can adjust the lineup of bites to feature more of the flavors that you tend to swallow. But they don't just hit you with the same flavor time after time. They can also test out some unexpected morsels, because even if it's not your favorite, it's just a bite, and there's another one waiting that might be amazing. Without a menu, you lose the experience of choosing, but you gain the experience of being surprised over and over and over again. Plus, a lot more people can make morsels than can make a whole menu, so this restaurant can recruit way more cooks trying way more tricks to make their morsels tasty. This restaurant is TikTok and Reels and YouTube Shorts and all of the other imitators, and it is probably the most engaging media interface that I've ever seen, just in terms of sheer entertainment by watch time. There's a catch though. This sequential feeding system wouldn't work if the dishes were big or complicated. It only works with morsels. If you take away the user's agency, you arrive at short form. We've seen this happen before with Tinder. Instead of a dating app based on a menu, they showed one profile at a time, forcing feedback from the swiper, and what happened? The profiles became short form. Just photos, a couple of words, and an algorithm that encodes our subconscious responses more than our reflective intentions. Maybe you noticed that all the dating apps became Tinder. So, is all of media becoming TikTok? I've been trying to figure out just how much human attention has shifted into these feeds, but only the platforms know that and they don't release the data. But they do these quarterly calls with investors, and if you go back through the past few years, you can kind of hear just how big of a response Meta and YouTube have made to the rise of TikTok.
Real will be more different. More than 20% of the time, 50% of the time that people spend on Instagram.
Over 15 billion views each day, 30 billion, 50 billion plus 70 billion.
We now average over 200 million daily views on YouTube.
Social media has gone through two eras so far. First was when all content was from friends, family, and accounts that you followed directly. The second was when we added all of the creator content. Now, as AI makes it easier to create and remix content, we're going to add yet another huge corpus of content on top of it.
It's really easy for me to think of this as the bowl of potato chips that someone sticks on the table that you didn't order, but it's there, so you snack on it.
No one can eat just one.
And It makes me wonder if Howtown shorts are kind of like, do you know those like pea-shaped potato chips?
Right. I know what you're talking
It's
about.
like a green Cheeto.
There's a version of this that's like, but our chips are made of vegetables.
Yeah. I suppose it's no surprise that a bottomless, personalized mystery snack dispenser could take over our media diets. But there is such thing as a healthy snack, right? So I'm going to tell you about all the research that I've read about this, and then maybe you can decide how you feel about it.
Yeah, great. Yeah. It's interesting, as you've been researching all this, I have been feeling especially scatterbrained. I'm distracted by the news. I've been moving between 2 different continents. So it's a happy coincidence that the sponsor for this week's episode is Headspace, the mental health platform.
Did you try it?
Yeah. They sent me a free subscription, and I've been taking their Finding Focus course, which is basically 10-minute sessions of guided meditation. And it's been really nice, honestly, to have that break in my day. A couple days ago, I actually just did one while I was waiting for the bus. You know, I've done a fair amount of reporting on mindfulness meditation over the years, and there's a real growing body of evidence from some pretty robust studies that it can improve your working memory, it can improve your ability to sustain attention. In one study, people who meditated with Headspace for a month were less distractible than a control group who did these standard brain training exercises, things like puzzles and memory tasks. So if you, dear viewer, want to help your brain to focus, you want to learn to meditate, maybe you just want to have these calm moments built into your day, you can start Headspace for free by following the link in our description box or scanning this QR code that's on screen. Usually it's just a 2-week trial, but with this link you get a full 60 days completely free.
Before we get to TikTok, there's a bigger question to answer. Have our attention spans really shrunk? According to a 2015 post by Time magazine, yes, they're now shorter than a goldfish. But this is one of those myths that won't die.
Here's a fun fact.
Some researchers have concluded that our attention span is now shorter
than a goldfish.
That's a scientific fact.
The claim came from a report published by Microsoft, which had this graphic showing our attention span declining from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, but they were citing something called statistic range, which in turn cited these sources. And when journalists tried to track down those sources, they didn't exist. The numbers were entirely made up for both the humans and the goldfish. So what would it really take to measure attention spans? Well, I talked to one of the few people who have tried.
My name is Gloria Mark.
She's written a book called Attention Span, and way back in 2003, she convinced an investment management company to let her peek over the shoulders of 14 of their employees as they worked.
And we would just observe them, and with stopwatches, every time they changed to do something else, we would click on the stopwatch, and it was very, very tiring.
Those employees spent about 2.5 minutes working on their computers before they switched to checking email or doing something else. Fast forward to 2012, she convinces another workplace to let her install software that tracks how often their employees click from one window to another, and finds that they switch every 75 seconds on average. Now it's closer to 40.
So yes, empirically, we can say that on screens, attention spans have shortened.
It's a little tricky because obviously we have this method switch. Like, without that dot at 2004, the trend doesn't look as dramatic, right? It's sort of funny to me to think about the adjudicators or the watchers in that first test were also having their attentions tested. Like, were they able to catch? Like, they're also having to focus. The other big question I would have is, like, is this measuring our ability to focus, or just how much distracting stuff there is in our lives? What I'm worried about is that I'm no longer able to read a book for 6 hours like I did when I was 12.
Has something changed about your brain?
Yeah, has something changed about the ability of my brain? It's obvious to me that something has changed about the way that computers work. Like, yeah, I've just got notifications. There's literal sounds that are telling me you should be distracted by this other thing right now. And so I'm still curious about, like, if there's actual damage being done to our mental systems, I guess.
The advantage of Gloria Mark's approach is that it captures real life.
It's not just bringing people into a laboratory, having them sit for an hour in front of a computer, but we actually observed what people did over the day in the course of their actual work.
The limitation is that it can't distinguish between these 3 different influences on our ability to focus. There's our attentional capacity, that's what we generally think of when we say attention span.
Then there's our motivation, how much we need or care about focusing on this task. And there's competition, how much is our environment distracting us. Now, in a lab, they can get closer to controlling for motivation and competition, but the tasks that they give people don't look anything like real life. Let me show you. This is a classic attention test. They tell you to memorize this image, and then you go through these rows, crossing out the items that match the one that you memorized. You get 20 seconds per row. There's 14 rows. They look at how many errors you make, how fast you work, whether you get worse over time. And on this test, performance in adults has actually been increasing. That's according to a study that compiled scores from 3 decades and 32 countries. In children, overall performance hasn't changed, but their test-taking style has. They've become faster, making more errors, but also completing more items. Now, researchers who run lab tests like these don't claim to be measuring attention span.
I think we often, in daily life, and I even do this myself, we just talk about attention, and it feels obvious, like we know what it means to pay attention. But actually, if we give people different tasks, we can see that there's distinct components of attention that aren't necessarily related to each other.
Monica Rosenberg studies patterns of brain activity during attention tests.
When I'm watching a really engaging movie, like my lab collected data as people watched Hitchcock film and YouTube videos about cooking. Is this the same kind of attention, or is there something fundamentally different about being engaged in a narrative that I'm motivated to follow versus forcing myself to do this boring task? And it turns out there's some similarities, but there's also some differences. And so I think how well I do on one task with pictures is not indicative of how well I pay attention all the time, in all time. It certainly helps me read it, but it's not a perfect measure.
So let's set aside the concept of attention spans. It's a really fuzzy term. It's hard to measure. The sharper question to ask is, if you binge short-form video, what exactly gets worse? Is it your memory, your reasoning? That's what the next few studies are trying to pinpoint. If you ask, do people who say they're addicted to short-form video also have trouble focusing? So far, the answer to that seems to be yes. A recent review of 14 studies found that increased SFV use, that's short-form video, was associated with poorer cognition, including attention and inhibitory control. But whenever you see that term "was associated with," that's scientist code for we're not saying this causes the problem.
Right. It's sort of our social media and teen health all over again, where it's our depressed teens becoming depressed because they are on social media, or are they seeking it out?
Yeah, I think this is the question with basically all of the harmful effects that people are attributing to these new technologies is almost all the research can't distinguish correlation from causation. But there are a few experimental studies that I wanted to highlight. There are at least 2 different cognitive tests where people perform worse after scrolling a shorts feed. One is a kind of trick question quiz, and the other is about whether you can remember to do something that you plan to do. So first, there's a measure based on these 3 questions.
A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost?
This is supposed to capture analytical thinking. To get these questions right, you have to switch out of autopilot. Like your gut is screaming, 10 cents, and you need to override that. 72 college students at Peking University in Beijing took this test after either spending 30 minutes scrolling TikTok, or the Chinese version of TikTok, or 30 minutes reading. And the TikTok group did worse. The researchers wanted to know, does what you watch matter? So they ran a second study, but this time, people watched either a cute animals playlist or a science experiments playlist. They also changed how people watch. Some could swipe through the videos like a normal feed, others had to sit and watch the same clips stitched together into one long video, and here's what they found. It didn't matter whether you watched animals or science, but the swiping groups consistently did worse on the cognitive reflection test. They got 0.38 fewer questions right out of the 3 questions total. That's 12% of the scale after 30 minutes from just swiping alone.
Okay, interesting. So if you're subjected to essentially just a montage of videos that you don't have control over, you are not degrading your analytical thinking as much as if you're swiping through and getting to just skip whenever you are bored. It's sort of interesting because you think of that decision is interacting with the interface, right? That decision is cognitively more intense than just sitting back and letting something happen to you, right?
Yeah, unless boredom is cognitively intense in a way that we don't recognize. Okay, so that's one test that short-form video makes you worse at. The other is a test of perspective memory, which is when you remember to do something that you intended to do, like picking up the dry cleaning, or joining a Zoom meeting, or taking a medication that you're supposed to take. Researchers at the University of Munich wanted to know how short-form video feeds affect that ability.
Because it was coming from general observation that, like, if you scroll a bit, you feel like, don't want to say that you feel like new, but like you kind of
dissociate.
yeah, dissociate a bit. So it was something like, we said, okay, it's actually really happening, like, and we felt that. So we said, okay, let's figure out how we can, make this solid user study and investigate what can be a cognitive function that will be associated.
So how would you test perspective memory?
Boy, oh boy. Well, it feels like, yeah, we're getting tested all the time. If you tell me to do something, wait 30 minutes, is that long enough to consider perspective? Or does it have to be like, I know I have a meeting on Wednesday at 1, and you show up at the meeting? Is there a time scale involved in what is considered perspective memory?
Yeah, well, I mean, the way that psychologists define it for their purposes is even much shorter than that, because they need a way to measure it in the lab with subjects that they don't have access to very long. So the way they try to capture perspective memory, this idea of remembering the previous goal or intention, is they embed a task in a task. So you're going to try this out.
Oh, great. I should have slept more last night.
Subjects were told to press N on their keyboard if the word on the screen is a real word.
My heart is racing.
And M if it's a fake word. But if they saw the words blue, purple, or green, they were supposed to press Q, W, or E, respectively.
Purple is...
That's the perspective memory task.
No, I did it wrong. I got it wrong already. I already know. House band? Yeah. Green. Love green.
They had people do this task and then take a 10-minute break in which they either just rested, scrolled Twitter, watched a YouTube video, or scrolled TikTok, and then they took the test again. When they compared the scores from before the break and after the break, the performance on the real word, fake word task was the same. But for the blue, purple, green task, where they needed to remember that second intention, one group saw a big drop in their scores. It was the group that scrolled TikTok during the break.
What this is basically getting at is if you should be keeping something in mind, you lose that with the scrolling behavior.
But not just scrolling, because Twitter is a scroll behavior as well.
Right, that's true. It's short form video specifically.
That study took place in Germany, but I was able to give this test to Adam in English because researchers in the UK replicated it in their own sample of 45 students. In this time, they tested different ways of watching video. One group was limited to 10 swipes, the other group was allowed to swipe as much as they wanted, and there was a control group that just sat quietly. The group that watched shorts but was limited to 10 swipes didn't see a drop in their performance. The unlimited swiping group did.
So again, it's like something about just being able to do this mindlessly is the problem. So if you're watching this in a clipped short, don't swipe away.
Actually, what you should do is download all the Howtown shorts. We'll watch them in one big screen.
There you go.
So that's basically where we're at with the research. There's a few of these experimental studies. They're using a few different types of cognitive tests, none of which really map onto our popular conception of attention span, but are related cognitive skills. And they're raising a few red flags, but obviously the caveats of small samples and tasks that are very different from our everyday lives.
Now I want to know if I'm scrolling TikTok every night before bed for 2 hours. Am I just generally having a worse perspective memory in my life? Or is that confined to just right after I use it?
Long-term studies would actually really inform and maybe guide better ethics and policy in designing the interface. I think this is actually something that could really impact the quality of life of people, probably, and provide evidence that maybe something has to change.
In 1890, the pioneering American psychologist William James wrote, "My experience is what I agree to attend to. My experience is what I agree to attend to." And there's more. He said, "Only those items which I notice shape my mind. Without selective interest, the consciousness of every creature would be a gray, chaotic indiscriminateness impossible for us even to conceive." 135 years later, a consciousness of chaotic indiscriminateness is not impossible to conceive. It's how I often feel when I lose myself in a feed. Even when that feed is full of things that are educational and funny or beautiful or really useful, genuinely my relationship to mangoes will never be the same. And yet, I keep coming back to this question of user agency, or what James called selective interest. Agency is at the heart of both analytical thinking and perspective memory. Those weird little tests are basically asking if your brain is on autopilot, or if you can slow down, make a turn, remember where you intended to go. It's not just your intentions that get lost. Feeds that nudge the customers into autopilot tend to nudge the cooks into autopilot too.
Scientists just created.
Here's what would happen.
Scientists just.
Here's what would happen.
Scientists
This
just.
is what would happen.
But not everything. Last time I checked Smarter Every Day, you guys had not posted anything into the assurance feed. Is that still the case?
That's the case. I have elected not to do that because I don't think it's good for people. I don't think the infinite scroll is healthy for our minds. It's easy for me to say this because Smarter Every Day has been around for a while and there's a lot of really awesome people that support the channel. But I think saying no to shorts is powerful. And I think it ultimately increases trust in creators. Could be wrong about that, but I don't know. That's where I'm at.
Justin's such a good guy.
Yeah,
I mean, I think, you know, obviously we want to be acting with integrity and sort of like living our values in all parts of our life, including the way we make this channel. But like having bite-sized information, you know, when I was at NPR, we would make 3-minute radio pieces all the time, right? That was like a pretty typical length. And I didn't feel like those were bad for the world just because it was a compressed amount of information about a complex subject. I thought like, oh, this is good. Like someone is learning something that they wouldn't otherwise know. The question is, do we want to participate in this, in these endless scrolls?
I don't know if you see these comments sometimes on our shorts. This one says like, your contents are the most anti-brain rot content out there, actually genuine and very high quality. And then someone responded, no such thing as anti-brain rot content when it's short form. So that's basically kind of the question that we need to answer.
Yeah, that's correct. Is there such thing as an anti-brain rot?
What do you think? Is this research strong enough that we should be changed? Let us know in the comments. You can also find more of my conversation with Destin and hear Adam and I processing all of this over on our Patreon. And if you're interested in meditation, which is arguably the opposite of binging a shorts feed, click the link in our description to try Headspace free for 60 days. That deal doesn't last, so try it now, see how your mind responds. Thanks for watching.
Zombie blood. Confusion crowds the judgment of our wretched enemy.
A few months ago, I got a letter, an invitation, from the Royal House of Anime, gods of anime. Wit Studio invited me to come over. I could not pass up. They've animated Attack on Titan, Spy Family, a ton of shows, and even the new upcoming One Piece. This is a huge deal. They don't normally do this kind of thing. I could not believe it. Me? Apparently they saw my drawing video where I taught myself how to draw and was like, hey, let's have this read over. But I was not just coming for a visit. I was actually coming to participate and draw myself. So we filmed the whole experience and it starts at 8 a.m. heading to Wit Studios with all the camera guys. We're heading to Wit Studios. The king of anime has invited us. I don't know why. If this doesn't go well, come swiftly. You distract them, and I'll just run into the woods and live there for the rest of my life. If this doesn't go
drawing with professionals. That's kind of daunting, but I think it will be really valuable information. We'll learn a lot, and there's always plan B.
So first off, I got to meet with the board of directors and the creators. A bit of cultural explanation here. Japan is very formal business-wise, no matter what. You wear a business suit and a tie. Everyone looks the same in the business industry. So the fact that these guys pull up in Attack on Titan t-shirts and their goofy attitude, I absolutely love. These guys were awesome.
At least we have war.
Every day? So you need to also
Can you tell how much I am nervous about the drawing bit? I knew I was gonna draw with the other animators, the warm-up drawing session, but I was dying on the inside, okay? This is something about drawing in front of other people, especially pros.
How useful
like,
this
it's
machine
just
is
daunting.
to our efforts.
But first, they introduced me to some of their work.
Let's go!
Attack on Titan. The legendary 18-second animation cut.
This legendary scene in particular. You can probably tell what's so special about it. There's no cuts. They told me initially this was supposed to be 3 cuts, but the director just came in and decided to go Super Saiyan and was like, no cuts.
江原さんが自ら言ったんで、もうそこはもう彼にお任せして作業に入ってたんですけど、江原さんはずっと会社に居続けました。
Mr. Ibarra came up with the idea to have it in one. So he had to take responsibility completely. Because of that, he was in the office working on the animation for the whole day for several days. No one has expected this much of work to be done.
Oh, really?
So when everyone was checking the animation, they were saying that Mr. Ibarra is crazy. One word. Not awesome, it's crazy.
Maybe you have to be crazy more then.
I love how they emphasize just how crazy this was. This sort of move not only did it push the whole studio, but it pushed the whole industry as a whole. Seeing the original drawings for it in person, how this was all made and thought out was seriously so sick. Then I was introduced to every department in the animation studio, and first up was director of color design.
But before we get into that, let's get real for a second. The internet is worse than ever. Everything is free apps, free services. But remember, if it's free, you're the product. And companies have taken full advantage of it. Your name, your phone number, your address, your relatives, your shopping habit, they trade this and sell this. And you might be like, I don't really care, whatever. They make money off your data. And it's not just like a little bit either. You're worth a lot more than you think. An estimate was $250 billion every year, and per person in the US is around $700. That's crazy. The good news is that you can clear yourself from these companies. You have the legal right to do it. Yes. Problem. It will take you forever, and you have other problems in your life. I understand. That's where Incogni comes in. They do all the work for you. You just sign up, give them the authority, and then you sit back and relax and you watch the updates come through. Oh, another one new. I think it's so cool because it used to be a thing where you were just helpless to, and you just had to accept. But now you can actually regain control. Take control of your privacy because otherwise someone else is going to do it for you. They also have this custom removal.